Welcome to the Money Insights Podcast, where high-income earners come to learn wealth-building strategies that will take them from high income to high net worth. With your hosts, financial and wealth-building experts, Christian Allen and Rod Zabriskie.
Welcome into today's episode of the Money Insights Podcast. I'm your host, Christian Allen. With me, as always, Rodney, the pod, Zabriskie. Rod, what's going on, man?
Hey, I am doing great. How are you?
I'm pretty dang good, man. I can't complain. Here's the deal. I find that even when I try, nobody listens, so I'm not even going to bother with it. No, actually, in reality, I can't complain. Life's pretty good. I'm headed to Hawaii tomorrow for my wife's 40th birthday, so I planned all of it, Rod. Every single bit of it. She helped me with the idea, but I was like, all right, I'm going to take the reins here. And I'm not really sure if she nudged me to take the reins or if I was like, I'm just doing this. But one way or another, I'm excited because I have a rockin' good time planned in Kauai, the only island we have not been to yet. So
I'd love to go to Kauai. That sounds good.
Yep.
I'll be excited to hear about it. And all the guys in the room are just giving you full credit because whatever you did, you did. So
yeah, that's yep. Now, to be fair, I did utilize a travel agent. That would have been brutal if I didn't, because I have activities every day, 2 activities a day, basically.
Nice.
Right.
Nice.
And so just thinking about going to do all those things, I'm really excited about the doors off helicopter flight. So
okay.
we've been doing the regular helicopter flights and they're super fun, but we found a doors off version that sounds even cooler. So
Nice.
Assuming we make it out alive, then I'll let you know how it goes when we
just get strapped in. You'll be good.
Week. Okay, Rod, as much fun as it is to hear about Christian's vacays, that is likely not why people are here. Today, we're going to be talking about what I think is a really interesting topic. And it's one that I have wrestled with and thought a lot about throughout basically my entire adult life, and for different reasons. And we'll talk about both sides of it. But the title of today's podcast is The Wealth Building Paradox: Why It's Never Been Harder and Why It's Never Been Easier to Build Generational Wealth.
I like
There's
it.
2 sides to this coin. Okay, so let's start out. I want to start back in 22-year-old Christian days, right? So I'm just getting going. Okay, so I got married at 22. I was pretty young. You were pretty young when you got married. 23,
Yeah.
22?
21. I was almost 22.
Oh gosh,
21.
You beat me by, dang it. Okay, anyway, we're so Rod and Christian, we're young bucks, and we're at this place in our world where we've got to go take the world on, right? And You've got a family. That means you've got to find a place to live. If you're like Rod and Christian, you start having kids fast, relatively. You were faster than me and more often than me, but still. So I remember feeling, Rod, incredibly overwhelmed when I got to this place where, and I've told this story. So I'm 22 years old. It's 2006, 2007. And the people around me are like, you have got to get into a house. If you don't get into a house now, you may never get into a house, right? Because you don't have a lot of perspective, and if you don't have a lot of people who are money savvy around you, my dad was fairly money savvy, but he passed when I was 19, and so I was kind of getting this advice hey, the housing market may never slow down. By the time you want to get into a house, it's going to be just way too far-fetched for you to even have a chance of getting there. And can I just say, Rod, that same problem exists today. Now, I was fortunate. We had some fortunate things work in our direction that made it possible for us to get into the house. But I bought at a terrible time. I've said this before, right? I bought it at that time because I felt the pressure, I needed to get in. Otherwise, I didn't feel like I would ever get there. And the greater pressure that I was feeling was how am I actually going to build and create the wealth that I'm hoping, or that I believe that I don't know if believe's right. I just wanted to create something, but I honestly didn't know how. And I remember feeling incredibly overwhelmed at that stage of life because everything was getting more expensive, right? The housing one was the big one, but you could say the same thing about taxes and medical and all these different things. We're going to talk about that. But anyway, the reason that this like spoke to me is because I just remember wrestling with this idea of, is it even possible today? Okay, quick perspective. My mom, my parents, born in 1953, they bought their first house. They were early 20s. They bought it for like $15,000, right? My first house, Rod, at the same age was $285,000. And by the way, they were probably, well, I don't know, maybe mine was a little bit bigger because houses just kind of have started to get, it got bigger and bigger over time, right? But like, that is a massive difference. In fact, I remember this moment when I was probably in my late teens, or probably 15, 16 years old as I think about it. We were going on a little drive to see one of my parents' friends' house, and they were mortified and blown away that they would spend $300,000 on a house. And I'm talking, they were like, and it was a big old house too, by the way. I remember going to and being like, whoa, that is a big house. Like, so anyway, things have changed a lot, Rod. Things have changed a lot.
Yes, they have.
And anyway, I just thought this would be an interesting conversation. I don't know if I've talked to you about that stage in your life. I mean, we've talked about it in terms of, hey, I was told, hey, go push money into 401ks and stuff like that. But what was your view like early in your adult life around how do I actually get ahead? And when I say build generational wealth, like I was talking at that point about building any wealth. I was talking about just getting ahead. You know what I mean? So anyway, I'm curious, Rod, on your side, like what was that stage of life like for you? And do you remember having similar or different types of feelings?
Yeah, so I was, I mean, at that stage, this would have been around 2000, 2001.
Okay.
So we were kind of already in the dot-com bust, right?
Mm-hmm.
And 9/11 happened kind of right around that
9/11
time.
right then.
So things were kind of a bit in turmoil, just uncertainty, like what's going to happen, right? So I didn't get the same kind of thing like, oh man, which makes sense, right? 2006, 2007, just things were going bonkers. Values were going high. It makes sense that people
you weren't feeling
that
like that, like pressure, like, okay, I've got to buy a house immediately type of stuff. But did you feel apprehensive? I don't know if apprehensive is even the right word. Did you feel concerned that you weren't going to be able to figure out how to get ahead and build your family the stability that you felt like they needed and they deserve to have?
Yeah, here's the part where I was feeling pressure, apprehension was because of Dave Ramsey.
Because it always comes back to Dave.
I'm throwing him under the bus, but there are a bunch of loud voices.
Yeah. There's a lot of other
and they
voices.
were saying, well, from your income, you don't want to have a house payment that's more than like 25% or something of your income.
Yeah.
And I was looking at that and I was like, if that's the case, I'm never
getting a house.
It's not going to happen. Right. Like at least the way I was feeling at the time.
Yeah.
And because I remember because of that, I did the math, but we were still okay. We weren't big spenders. We didn't have car payments. We didn't have a bunch of other regular expenses.
Take a quick time out and give you some huge props, Rod, because that's always been how you guys work. Like they are frugal, whether they have money or not. The Zabriskie family knows how to make a dollar go a long way, which I've always admired about you. So anyway, keep going.
So the reason that I give that caveat is because I think we were at like 53% of our paycheck was going towards
the house.
Our house payment.
Oh wow, that's a bigger chunk than I expected you would go. But I guess if food's only like 2%, you guys just do it all out of the garden, then you can make up some ground on that.
Well, yeah, we won't we won't talk about that. But the point is that I was willing to buck whatever voices were out there and what they were saying.
Okay.
And I just thought, you know what, we're gonna and I'm glad I did, because exactly what you're saying. So we got in, bought our first house in, I think it was 2001. Must have been 2002.
Good time to buy.
Yep. And then
saw the run up.
3 years later, we built a home. So you would say, well, that's a quick turnaround. All the fees you spent to get into the first home, and then fees again to get in the second. But still, we took a big leap. We got a jump
I'm
there.
sure. Yeah.
And then by the time we bought our next house in 2007, again, another jump. So it actually worked out really well. And can I say this? The payment that I had at that time is, I have a little higher payment now. But the reason
it's
is
about the
because,
same.
yeah, but because all of the equity run-ups that we had, even though we bought and sold several times since then, our base level mortgage has been pretty similar each time as we went, because we have a lot more equity, but we were just taking whatever we sold the old one for, put it in the new one. And again, we've done some cash out, doing some other things like that. I don't know, but anyway.
Well, mine was definitely not that. I started at 285, and 3 years later I was at like 220.
Yeah.
So
Stuck.
not quite the same trajectory, and so maybe that is part of why in my young world, I just felt like, man, it's just so hard for people to get ahead. And by the way, I was starting out as a financial advisor. In that space, your income is fluid. And so there's a lot of variables there, but I was also seeing people who were running up against the same thing. And, I I remember seeing a lot of people on like arms that were going, 5-1 arms that were going to have a balloon start coming up. And like, there's just a lot of difficult stuff that it felt like was going to be really hard to overcome. And of course, most of us have evolved and kind of, made the proper adjustments to kind of, keep things going. But I think the biggest thing is I just wanted to emphasize how difficult I felt it is. And I think it's important to recognize some of the reasons that it genuinely is more difficult for people. So if you're a young 22-year-old listening to this show, there's probably not a lot of you out there, but if you're a young buck listening to this show, like, I feel you. I genuinely believe it's harder today than it has been to get started. That's the most difficult part, to kind of get ahead. And once I can get to that point, that's when we can really build out our flywheel effect. Okay. So Rod, we've got to talk about some of the reasons that it actually is harder. So where do you want to start?
Should we start with taxes?
Everybody loves taxes. Taxes. Yeah. Okay. So this one's interesting because in some ways, taxes are actually, again, we say this, taxes are at a low rate, lower than average rate historically. So from that standpoint, it's less about like, oh, I'm just having to pay so much tax. But there are a lot of questions about tax law, where things are going. What are those changes going to mean to me in the future? Am I really going to get value out of things like qualified plan? Like, there's just a lot of that kind of stuff, right?
Yeah.
So taxes are always a huge one. And of course, if we now take this to the high income earner world, taxes become massive because, and I say this all the time, it's going to be likely the biggest cost that you ever have, right? It's not likely, far and away going to be the biggest chunk taken out of your paycheck for the rest of your life, right?
Yeah.
So what do we do about that? Oh, actually, not what do we do about it, Rod? Keep going.
Well, yeah, because we always focus on in here the income tax. But
yeah. Okay, so we haven't. Okay, good point. Let's reset that. So we've been focused on income tax primarily, but to your point, that's not the only tax that exists. So keep talking.
Yeah. So of your total
taxes,
every dollar that you have comes into your world, how much of that goes to tax? Well, again, if you're a high income earner, and depending on where you live in the country, what state you're in, 40 to 50% of that is likely going to income tax, payroll tax, all those things, right? Before it even hits your account. And then when you go and buy anything, you pay sales tax or gas tax or whatever, use tax, or you're paying tolls as you're driving down the road, or other things like that. And so then the question is, okay, well, is it worse today than it was? And I would say it absolutely is. And then there's another area where it shows itself, and that's just in regulation. regulation is higher today on businesses than it used to be. And what does that mean? That means that the businesses have to charge more for their services and goods because of the regulation. Here, let me just give you a really ridiculous example that I heard about.
Okay.
Because especially if you serve any kind of food, then you have all kinds of different regulations that you have to follow, right? And coming from different levels. So it could be the county, right? They have their health department and they're going to come and do inspections and things like that. And then you have at the federal level and state level, etc. Well, I heard a really ridiculous example where I don't remember the exact details, but let's just say it was a state regulator came in and they said, hey, the door between where the customers are eating and where you're preparing the food, it swings out. It has to swing in. You can't have your door swinging out. So like, okay, great. We're going to go fix that. Not 2 months later, the county regulator comes in and says, hey, your door swings out and it has to swing in.
It has to swing in.
And they're like, wait a minute. I was just told I don't care. I don't care what the other people say. Our regulations say this. And so you have to do it. And they're like, okay, it's a no.
Well, how do we go? That is wild, Rod.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, all sorts of weird things can come about. So that's a wild one. Okay. So taxes are a big issue, right? Yep. And to your point, it trickles down to every part of life, including maybe especially if you're a business owner. Like obviously starting a business is so difficult anyway, right? And when you add even little things like small tax elements, that those things can end up having a big impact on whether I'm able to actually kind of get over the hump and create a thriving, first a surviving and then a thriving business. So taxes are huge. Okay. And to your point, they come in income tax, estate tax, capital gains tax. All of these different taxes are part of why it's difficult to build wealth, right?
Yep.
And especially at that surface level. Okay, the next one, and probably the biggest one, is the crazy pace of inflation, which, by the way, Rod, inflation metrics are just a mess. Does it feel like every time there's an inflation metric, they're like, oh, but it doesn't include this, this, or this? Yeah, and you're like, always. Well, what good is an inflation number without medical costs built into it?
Yeah, or housing.
Built into it. Oh, this is what it's been.
No big deal.
Like, we're just talking about a gallon of milk here. Like, what's happening? You know what I mean? But here's the deal. Anybody who knows and has looked at things holistically, there have been some massive inflation issues. And again, when I look at the the CPI or the CPIU, am I saying those right?
Yeah.
CPU,
yeah, those are the two.
Anyway, so if I'm looking at those, I can get a general sense of what inflation is, but oftentimes there are critical missing pieces. So I think about housing. When I was young, that was the big one. Housing was going up at 15, 20% a year, right? And so if your wages were going up by 2% or not going up at all, well, it became really challenging to get to a point where you could even get a loan to get into a house. You know what I mean? And then, of course, the other biggest one on my mind is the medical industry. And I haven't read the statistics on this recently, but I remember last time I did, looking at the inflation numbers over, from, I think when I looked at it, it was 1990 to 2010. And it was an insanely high inflation number. I think even double digits, right? So again, you're talking about a necessary part of life that we all have to deal with. Nobody can get away with not having any medical related costs at any point, right? So everybody has to live in some place. We need housing. So these are things they're going to be there. And guess what? Food's the same way. So anyway, long story short, everything has gone up. Some of those things have gone up exponentially. And I think those are the things that really become, especially when it's bigger things like housing, like medical.
Yeah, I was looking at some stats in preparation for this, kind of comparing the growth of wages against the growth of stuff, the basket of goods, right? And some of the stuff wages outpaced it. So stuff like milk, like a lot of the food products, they're relatively speaking, the dollar goes further now than it used to.
Yeah.
But
Okay.
there are those, and especially if you're someone who has a lot of medical issues, or someone in your family does,
it's
you
hard.
know, the medical stuff has just gone crazy relative to wages. And part of that is because you say, well, all of the developments and technology and things as they advance, then it's just more expensive to treat those things. But grateful we can treat them. And again, I'm not one to say I'm ungrateful for that. Just the
Right.
reality of it is,
We're not suggesting that there's not some positive medical breakthroughs that are happening, but they also come with a cost. And for some people, like, no ability to even get it. So we'd have to recognize both sides of that.
Yep, for sure. And then obviously housing. I think housing, I was looking at it between 1975 and today, and for every dollar increase on the wage side, housing was up
That's
like
nuts.
$8 or something. I mean, it was some really crazy, yeah. And like you said, the homes tend to be nicer. The amenities we have, the fact that there's a garage attached or whatever, right? Like compared to what they were building in 1975, or what was available, right? The totality of what was on the market at the time. But still, right? Either way, if you're 22 right now facing getting into it, well, it's what it is right now.
Good
That's
point.
what matters.
We've got a list here of a bunch of different things that kind of make it harder. I don't want to hit on all of them. They all fit in some way, shape, or form, but let's just go through some of the things that I think are so we've obviously talked about taxes, inflation, asset inflation. I'm talking about real estate specifically. One of the things that's been that we have to keep in mind is global instability, geopolitics, supply. So whenever I'm reading this, I think COVID, like we experienced all of these types of issues. And certainly, again, if I'm trying to get ahead, or let's say that I'm early in life and I'm, trying to get ahead, trying to just create something above and beyond what I spend. You know what I mean? I'm just trying to get ahead. Black swan events like that are really, really difficult and can have, a several year setback, and they're totally and completely out of our control. So again, in things like that now, this is hard because it's not like black swan events didn't exist in history. They did. And so maybe this isn't necessarily any more difficult, but we just something we got to be kind of keeping in mind in relation to as we're trying to get to that point. And then, by the way, if I'm the high income earner who's later in life and who's trying to kind of create that next level of wealth, I run into the very same types of issues, but for maybe a slightly different reason. But that geopolitical risk is absolutely something that we want to be thinking about and taking into account. Again, whether it's better or worse than it was 20, 30, 40 years ago is probably debatable, but it's certainly something we have to keep our eye on.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, Rod, let's talk about the decline in guaranteed income. So this is one that anybody who's 55 or above probably has a really good look into what retirement looked like in the past. And it was, I work for 30 years or 30 or 40 years. I have a pension. I take my Social Security. I try to save some outside of that. Those three things are really what make up my post-work life, right? And there was, to be fair, quite a bit of stability in that. You knew that if I put in the time, the energy, the hours, the effort, I was going to get something back out of that, right? Okay. Well, most of that stuff doesn't exist today, or at least it's not as prevalent. So if we go to if you go to like the government and state, things like that, you'll get some pensions out there, or some like old massive companies that have been around for a long, long time still have pensions. But even those ones are phasing it out for new people and just kind of keeping the stuff that they've got going, right? Because they already made that promise. But the reality is pensions are almost extinct. And so what's happening is that all of that risk is now on us instead of the company, right? It's on us as the individual to figure out a way to create that income without having to rely on the company. And of course, we know what happened. That's where the defined contribution world came, right? Pensions are this defined benefit world. That was the bread and butter. Everybody did that. Now doesn't even hardly exist. And now we're in this defined contribution world. Well, here's what I can say. If you're somebody who, especially if you're like, if you have that traditional view where, I'm going to work hard and then I'm going to retire at 60, 65 or whatever, like that one change of events or that, and again, the reason that it happened was because the companies couldn't manage it. So they're like, well, we can't figure out how to manage the, longevity that people are having. So let's see if they can figure it out themselves. The problem is that most people don't know how to figure it out either. So we run into the very same issues that these big companies were running, but we don't have a lot of that same, we don't have the backing, we don't have the money. So at some level, I would say without question, if I'm at least just trying to create that kind of baseline, prototypical work a long career and have a good retirement, that world is almost certainly more difficult to create today than I think it's ever been.
Yeah, and especially for high income earners, because you start running into those maximums of what you can contribute. And even if you're doing that, the hope of replacing your working income in the future with these $20,000 a year contributions or something into your 401k, well, that's just not going to get you there, right?
Yep, exactly. The only other one that I think would be worth hitting on, and that I want to spend a couple minutes on, is just the things like I will call them wealth erosion risks. Things like creditors, lawsuits, lifestyle creep.
Mm-hmm.
Those are kind of some of the things that, as high income earners, we probably start to think more. So now we're in this phase, like, okay, we've made it to the point where we're building wealth, we're savers, we're living like a good quality of life. But I still am now at the point where I'm looking for something bigger. I want to create generational wealth. I want to be able to pass down something that's really significant to that next gen. Okay, Rod, the last one that I want to take just a minute and talk about is some of the things that can come up and erode our wealth when we're not really paying attention. So I'm thinking about things like lawsuits. Okay, this is a big one. This is going to sound terrible, Rod. I'm involved in 3 lawsuits currently, Rod.
Yikes.
If you would have asked me when I was younger if I would ever be involved in any lawsuit, I would have been like, that's insane. There's absolutely no reason to be involved. Now, to be fair, these aren't like, I won't go into details, but the point is everybody is more litigation heavy, right?
Yeah.
Everybody is. And so that ends up being one of those things that as I get into that next phase, right, I've at least made it. I've created a baseline. I'm building wealth, but man, it can be wiped out really fast if I end up on the wrong side of a creditor situation, a lawsuit, or whatever, right? So anyway, that's one that I think we just have to be aware of. And the reason I bring it up is because it's almost certainly worse today than it was 30, 40, 50 years ago.
For sure. I think it's on an exponential curve, this just litigation in general. So I totally
divorce, agree. Same thing, Rod, divorce.
Yep.
So all of these divorce, 50% of marriages end up in divorce, right? Or something close to it. Maybe it's not quite that, 40%. But the point is that these are all different things that we have to be kind of thinking about, be aware of. And again, I just want to emphasize, I feel you. If you're feeling like it's hard to get ahead today, I think that there are absolutely reasons to feel that way. The good news is, Rod, there's also some great opportunities today that didn't exist 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago that we can take advantage of. And so next, I want to spend time on kind of our more optimistic side and talk about the ways that I actually do think it's easier to build generational wealth today than it's ever been in history. Okay. And the first one I want to start with is technology. Okay. This is nuts, Rod. I have like 7 questions a day that come to my head that I don't know the answer to that I can get instantly. Right? Yeah. Well, guess what? Even 20 years ago, I would have just had to been like, I don't really know. right? And unless I have time to like go ask somebody, hit up the library, like I just wouldn't know those things.
The whole nature of our conversations has changed, because it used to be you'd be sitting around with friends or family or whatever, and you'd just be arguing about, well, no, it was this, no, it was that.
Yes.
You don't know what you're talking about. You want to bet? Okay, $50, and then whatever. But now it's just like, oh, we have a question? Okay, we're going to look it up. Oh, hey, here's the answer. Isn't it interesting?
Yep, and we have to get used to having egg on our face right there and then in the moment, instead of it being able to, like, we can't really die on our sword in the same way. Yep, it's just going to happen. But really, though, you think about it, there's more access to information than there's ever been, and if I'm somebody who's interested in money, that means there's more access to information about money, about strategy, about taxes, about all elements of about investing. All of these elements are right there at our fingertips that we just didn't have. It was almost like in the past, you kind of had to like just put your head down, go and figure out and make a lot of those mistakes. And it's not to say that there's not value in and that we're not going to make mistakes. We're still going to, but we should be able to make less of them, right?
Yeah. Well, and just think about, from a technology standpoint, the apps, right? So the fact that somebody can become an Uber driver, or the fact that somebody can have whatever Robinhood or something on their phone and just be quickly, doing the trades that in the past you just couldn't do that, right? So there's so many implications to this, and obviously AI is taking that to another level where I don't even have to be the one necessarily doing it. I'm letting technology do the thinking, do the creating for me. And the implications of that are obviously amazing as well.
Yeah, it's pretty wild. So again, if I'm an opportunist, I have to look at that and be like, okay, there's never been a better time in the world for me to be able to go and accomplish whatever goals I have, right? And we're going to talk about some of the other ones too. Okay, so technology is absolutely huge. Alternative investments, Rod, this is a big one. This is one of those that has become more widely available, but also more widely accepted, right? As a definitive way. So it feels to me, based on the last 20 years, from the time I started in the industry to today, like, well, let's put it this way. Investing in, multifamily syndications wasn't even a thing 25 years ago. So getting access to to those types of deals that you would have had to be, institutional investor, have some types of like close relationships with, those things didn't even exist. And this obviously goes into the technology side. Now I have greater access to alternative investments, better ability to understand those, and the ability to work with people, whether they're across the country or in my backyard. All of those elements, like, think about how confined we were in the past just from geography, right? Now you look at our business like ours, and we have probably less clients in the state of Utah than we have in a dozen other states.
Right.
Do you know what I mean? It's just a very, very different world. And so, but again, alternative investments, things like private equity, private credit, they've become so popular and even prolific that it, for us, especially for high income earners who are already accredited, like, it's an opportunity to accelerate wealth in a way that probably would have been a lot more difficult. Because I think about okay, so here's an example. How many high income earning physicians, high income earning lawyers today actively then go out and put money into alternative investments? Whereas before, if they were going to do that, they would have had to go out and find the deals themselves, or find somebody who found, like, it was just a much bigger process. Know somebody. Yeah. And if you think about time, the time element is huge. Today, I can take all those steps in minutes. Whereas if I wanted to take those same steps to get to a place where I can purchase a real estate deal, it would have taken me exponentially more time. So in that way, like, just that access and ability to get to alternatives, I think, is a really big one. Rod, talk about business creation, because all of these obviously fit together, but in my mind, business creation is also one that's never had more opportunity than it does today.
Yeah. And it goes back to the technology. Obviously you have a tech company, you can do things there that you couldn't have done before. You couldn't have had any kind of platform from which to create an app that then becomes that millions of people across the country are using, and you get a cha-ching every time they do, right?
Well, think about how many people make money on Amazon.
Yeah.
Full-time businesses, huge businesses that people run all off of the platform like that. Like, it's pretty wild. And again, they didn't have to like go, rent a building, and, they didn't have all of those processes to start a business that were typically necessary to get there. Now, most of the businesses are people working right out of their homes, right off their computer, doing it all virtually. It's just wild to think about all of the options that are available to people.
And optimizing space, because that brings up another example, working from home. It used to be you lived at home. Well, you spent hours from 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. at your home, and then you spent, a couple hours of commuting, but then the hours from 8 to 5 or 6 or whatever in your workplace, and it was somewhere far away. And now that's all just here. Like, we're living that here as well, right? Working out of our home offices
day to day.
So,
and it's incredible, right? Like, it really does change your ability, your efficiency. So that might be as big. And again, they just all fit in one with another. But the efficiency level that we can create today, whether we're building a business, whether we're investing, right? That is just so much greater from a time standpoint, value standpoint, overall efficiency. Okay, so we've talked about technology, alternative investments. We talked about business creation becoming easier. Capital is more available today than it's ever been, because like there's more sophisticated. Two things. Okay, so one, there's been the private side that has really been built up over the last hour. Think about right now where we've been talking a lot about private credit. In fact, our last episode, Rod, private credit, right? The rise of private credit. Well, we saw private equity, but we're also seeing this private credit space where it's not just the banks that are giving access to money. It's anybody who wants to become a lender has more ability to be in that space and create more access to capital. So even if I'm not getting any more money from the banks today than I was 30 years ago, and we probably still are, but even if that wasn't the case, there's this entire private world that has blown up over the last 10, 15 years to the point where hard money loan, I can go on LinkedIn, type in hard money loans, and come up with 25,000 people who are hard money lenders. You know what I mean? Think about how hard it was to find a hard money lender if you weren't really engulfed in that real estate world. It was just like, wouldn't even know where to go. In fact, I think about my own world 10 years ago, I wouldn't have known where to go to do it. And now I'm like, it's just everywhere. It's just everywhere. Okay. Capital availability, education. Again, I feel like it goes right in line with technology, this unprecedented ability to get information and education, learn things more quickly than we ever have been able to before. And in that way, it's hard to say that we don't have more potential today than we ever. And of course, financial literacy specifically has become, it still needs work. Like, let's be really clear. The dominant narrative is very much still focused on what we call the middle America playbook, right? That's still the dominant narrative that exists out there. But the good news is we're seeing a swell of different ideologies that people are using, that are thinking about around wealth building. And again, back to this alternative and real estate space, that world is just kind of blown up to where now, and maybe some of it's just because of the space we play in, but now it feels far more common to run into people who are investing in both spaces than it was even when I started 20 years ago, like without question.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, Rod, is there anything that I missed that you want to hit on? I feel like we've covered most of it. There's probably other things that we could talk about, like networking and deal flow, and those types
being able to
of
connect
issues
with people, not just domestically but globally. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, all of those elements. So I guess what I wanted to do here, though, more than anything, is I wanted to show empathy to the people who are out here feeling like, man, it is just so hard to get ahead. Because guess what? If you feel that way, you're absolutely right. It is hard to get ahead. Now, the good news is it's absolutely possible. So if I can become more educated, and especially around financial literacy, then I think we have this unprecedented opportunity to build wealth. And in fact, Rod, I would even say that for myself. So if you would have asked the 25-year-old Christian, who, by the way, had big hopes and dreams at that time, if you would have asked me at that time, hey, at this stage of your life, would you have been able to build the kind of wealth that you have today? I don't know that I would have believed that I could have, even though I'm very much a mover and a shaker. I'm out there, I'm a doer. And yet I still believe that over the last, the time that I've been an adult, like the opportunity just continues to swell and get better and better for people who are excited about it, who are engaged in it, who are willing to take advantage of the tools that are available today. Like it very much is the golden age for creating generational wealth. It's hard to get ahead, but I think there's never been a better time to create and build generational wealth if that's your goal. What's your take?
And I'll add to that, and have a lifestyle that you can be happy with, because in the past, in order to get ahead, so many people had to be on the road a lot, or just always in the office and never at home with their family or whatever. Right. And now we can be engaged in the work we're doing and still put a lot of work into it. But then I walk out the door here and I'm with my family, right? I don't have the commute. I don't have the travel. Imagine the people that we work with today across the country, the kind of travel we would have to do to be meeting with them.
It would be insane
doing any of that.
But again, right? From an efficiency standpoint, we couldn't see anywhere near the kind of volume of people that we can. And of course, from a business perspective, that means that I don't have the same revenue opportunity. So I think that's a really, really powerful one, Rod. I'm glad that you brought that up. Any other kind of concluding thoughts before we sign out for today?
Just if you're in the challenging time, take heart and look for those opportunities, because chances are that they're there and they're accessible, and it's just a matter of seeing.
And if you're looking for opportunities, don't forget to tap into our Investment Insider series. We've been really excited about it. Our last one was Dr. Tyson Cobb talking about how he vets deals. We're going to have other really interesting, great deals that are out there on the horizon. So if you're somebody who's out there and thinking, hey, I want to keep going down this road, I want to build generational wealth, and I need to find the right types of people to work with, well, make sure to tap into the Investment Insider series, and you'll get access to that. Okay, I think this has been fun. Thanks, everybody, for hanging out with us this week, and we'll see you next week.
Thank you for listening to the Money Insights podcast. To learn more about the financial and business strategies discussed in this show, please visit moneyinsights.net. The views and opinions expressed on the Money Insights podcast are not intended to be individual financial, tax, or legal advice. Always consult with the appropriate advisor before making financial decisions. And if you're enjoying the show, please feel free to rate, subscribe, and leave a review wherever you listen to your podcasts. This will help others find the show and learn wealth-building strategies for themselves. Thanks again for tuning in, and we'll catch you in the next episode.